What's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got Gamebred and Jake Paul butting heads online, Michael Chandler's apology, the potential for a McGregor-Diaz trilogy fight, and much more. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to see more videos just like this. Now let's get into it. Michael Chandler is now apologizing for his harsh criticism of Dustin Poirier following UFC 269. You gotta give it up for Michael Chandler. He's been pretty classy for most of his time in the UFC, delivering high-octane fights and delivering respect whenever it's due. In fact, this time, he's apologizing for his quote, harsh criticism of Dustin Poirier that he posted on Twitter following UFC 269 earlier this month. Poirier was submitted by UFC lightweight champion Charles Oliveira in the fight via standing rear naked choke in the third round. Chandler's reaction was seen on Twitter for the world to see. Broke him, hashtag UFC 269, and he followed it up by tweeting this: "I would never ever quit. I went out on my shield after being separated from consciousness. Congrats to Oliveira." Now, a few weeks removed from the fight and having watched it back, Chandler is admitting that the word quit may have been a bit too harsh. Case in point, during a recent interview this week with MMA Fighting, Chandler talked about his comments in regards to the choke, and he said this.
You hear it with Joe Rogan, cage side, John Anik, DC cage side, and they go bananas when guys get out of it because you never quite know how deep a choke is. And I think there's always a little bit more fight left before a tap could happen. And yeah, I will admit, maybe I was a little bit too harsh. Maybe the word quit was not the right word to use.
You never really know how deep a choke is slapped on an opponent. Just ask Amanda Nunes, who was submitted by Juliana Pena that same night in what many are calling the biggest upset in promotion history. Many people say Nunes quit, while Pena says she practiced that same choke with her coaches and says it was completely on. In fact, Chandler knows exactly what this position feels like. Oliveira slapped on a standing rear naked choke in the first round of their fight for the vacant title back in May, but he broke free and then nearly finished the Brazilian with strikes. While Chandler does admit that he believes Poirier might have had more to give in that moment, he admits that it's easy for us watching the fight to say anything. But what do you think? Do you agree with Chandler's first assessment and believe Poirier quit in his fight against Oliveira? And what do you think about Chandler saying he was a bit too harsh in his criticism? Let us know in the comments. Jake Paul makes $5 million offer to Jorge Masvidal for boxing fight, and Gamebred responds. You gotta give it to Jake Paul. He knows how to create hype and keep the momentum going to stay relevant. He's coming off a beautiful 6-round knockout of Tyron Woodley last weekend in Tampa, Florida. It was just his 5th professional boxing fight and a rematch against a former UFC champion. And while he has only fought people with little to no boxing experience, he's doing it in front of massive crowds and delivering wins. Following that fight, Paul called out Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz for leaving the venue immediately following the fight, and even issued a challenge to them. Now, a few days removed from that fight, Paul went on his brother Logan's podcast, Impulsive, and formally challenged Gamebred, stipulating the details. This is what he said.
Masvidal, I got an offer for you right now. $5 million guarantee, plus percentage of pay-per-views. That's the most you would ever have made as a fight.
Oh my God.
Ever. So now you can't say, I either fight the best or I fight for money. $5 million guarantee, plus pay-per-view. Let's make it happen. That's the most you would ever have gotten paid, period.
Jake Paul was responding to Masvidal's statements, in which he said that,
I fight for money or to fight the best in the world.
Well, Masvidal heard Paul's comments and immediately responded with some choice words on Twitter. 1. The UFC isn't gonna let me go for chump change. 2. Make that 20 guaranteed plus pay-per-view, and I'm sure the UFC will be okay with it as long as I break them off their fee, and then I'll gladly break your face. Then, in a follow-up tweet, Masvidal continued, if the UFC still says no because the money is still too low, then come over to the UFC, sign a one-fight deal, and we can stipulate I can only box in the cage. If I do anything other than that, I will forfeit my purse to you. Come on over and get paid and laid out. Masvidal is under an exclusive contract with the UFC and wouldn't even be allowed to fight outside of the promotion without permission. The one case we can cite that the UFC allowed this was when Conor McGregor fought Floyd Mayweather back in August 2017, but that was clearly a very special case. Ben Askren and Woodley, who were both previously under contract with the UFC, have retired from MMA prior to fighting Jake Paul. The search continues for Jake Paul's next boxing opponent. But what do you think of this whole situation? Are you excited that Masvidal is responding to Paul and challenging him to come to the UFC? And do you believe Paul is serious with this offer? Conor McGregor Nate Diaz trilogy fight is still there, says UFC boss man Dana White, but says it's up to Nate. When Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz first met in May of 2016 at UFC 196, the hype was all too real and the fight more than delivered. Diaz submitted the Irishman in that fight and put an end to McGregor's seemingly invincible reign of terror, because the fight just before that, McGregor put Jose Aldo to sleep in just 13 seconds. The rematch between McGregor and Diaz just 5 months later at UFC 202 was the biggest pay-per-view event in history up until that point, with McGregor having come back strong to earn a unanimous decision win over Nate Diaz. Since then, both men continue to be fan favorites and huge draws, with McGregor becoming the biggest name in the sport and Diaz not too far behind. Now, with Diaz just one fight left on his UFC contract, there's been speculation of who could potentially be his last opponent in the promotion. The one name that some are now throwing out there is a familiar one, Conor McGregor. The Irishman is still nursing a broken leg that he suffered in his trilogy fight against Dustin Poirier, but UFC president Dana White is open to it. Case in point, during an interview with ESPN this week, he was asked about a potential trilogy fight between Diaz and McGregor. And this is what he said.
Always there. Yeah.
So,
that fight could happen. You can make that fight.
Yeah, okay.
There are a lot of fights that you can make for Nate Diaz, but Nate Diaz has to want that fight.
McGregor's MMA coach, John Kavanagh, recently stated that he would most likely return to the octagon mid-summer 2022 if all goes well with his rehab. But Dana says the ball is in Diaz's court. What do you think about Dana White's comments? And do you believe this would be a great return fight for McGregor? And who do you think would win this bout?
That's him now. He's super jacked.
Whoa.
USADA's gonna take a visit to him.
That's Conor?
Soon. Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, he looks like he's about to go WWF.
Yeah. He looks like a bodybuilder
Well,
from
that's
the 70s.
Look at him. He looks good though.
Whoa.
He looks so old now.
He looks different.
Yeah,
Well, he's got that crazy
beard.
beard. That beard's crazy. But he looks fit.
Don't forget to take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest fight news. Justin Gaethje likes his chances on the feet against Charles Oliveira, because if not, then he says he's The next UFC lightweight title fight is set, with Justin Gaethje scheduled to take on champion Charles Oliveira sometime in early 2022. A date for the fight is still pending, but there's no shortage of hype for this one, given how both men always bring their A-game and have delivered outstanding performances in their recent outings. But Gaethje knows that he's in for a tough one against Oliveira, whom he sees as a well-rounded fighter. Oliveira's submission game is incredible. He has the most submission victories in UFC history, for God's sake. But it's in the striking department that Gaethje believes will be the difference. Gaethje hits like a Mack truck. That's per Dustin Poirier and pretty much every other fighter he's taken on, except for Khabib. Gaethje says that he has to have the edge in the striking department for this one, or it's gonna be a long night. That's what he told ESPN's Brett Okamoto this week during an interview about the fight.
At the end of the day, if my striking isn't way better than his, then I wouldn't be in this. I'm per se. That's where I'm great. I'm great at creating pressure, creating damage, and stopping takedowns. So ultimately, he is going to be trying to get it to the ground because I'm going to find so much success in the striking department.
But Oliveira's striking game is no joke. In fact, this was the catalyst that led him to breaking down Dustin Poirier in his first title defense victory at UFC 269 earlier this December. The champion softened Poirier up with well-timed knee strikes, elbows, and strong punches that eventually wore down Poirier and opened up a standing back take that allowed Oliveira to sink in the rear naked choke and the W. In his fight against Michael Chandler as well back in May, Oliveira, who ended the first round in a bad position, came back strong in the second round and delivered a series of left hooks that floored Chandler and brought him the belt. Chandler is a common opponent that both men have faced. Gaethje is coming off a Fight of the Year contender in his all-out war against Chandler at UFC 268. Ultimately, this upcoming lightweight title fight has the makings of a potential Fight of the Year contender for 2022, and we can't wait for this one. But what do you think? Do you believe Gaethje has the edge in the striking department? Or do you believe that Oliveira's improvements, along with his incredible submission game, elevates his striking prowess because of the ground threat? And who do you think will win this fight? Brendan Schaub backs Chael Sonnen after the American gangster was cited for battery in a Vegas hotel altercation. By now, you must have heard about the violent altercation involving retired UFC fighter Chael Sonnen, who received 5 misdemeanor citations for battery from Las Vegas police. The altercation took place at the Luxor Hotel and Casino last Saturday evening, in which Sonnen was not arrested, but he was briefly detained by police. Las Vegas police stated that Sonnen fought 5 separate people and he received a battery citation for each one. An eyewitness says they allegedly saw the 44-year-old, quote, banging on the door of a room. A couple then walked by, and that's when the altercation took place. A brief video from the scene was also posted online, in which Sonnen was seen being escorted away by police, seemingly in handcuffs. While Sonnen wasn't immediately responding to comments, another former UFC fighter, Brendan Schaub, is praising Sonnen's actions and gave a little bit more details about what he heard actually transpired that night. According to Schaub, who made these comments during a recent episode of Big Brown Breakdown on Showtime, the altercation was the result of a drunk guy and his girl mouthing off and making lewd comments to Sonnen, but most importantly about and to his wife. Case in point, Brendan spoke at length about the incident and clips of it are online. This is what he had to say in a nutshell.
This is not a case of Chael Sonnen being high and wrecking his Bentley with strippers in the car. This is not the case of Chael domestic violence in any facet. He's in Vegas. He's walking to his room. Drunk guy and his girl start talking to his girl. The guy keeps commenting on his girl and her looks, and you're dealing with a guy's guy in Chael Sonnen, and he stuck up for his girl and beat the out of the guy. If your man's not willing to do that, he ain't.
While Schaub's version of the events have yet to be verified by authorities, if this is true, then Sonnen was sticking up for his girl, and Schaub is 100% in support of this. What do you think about this whole situation? Thanks for watching today's video. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel to see more videos just like this. See you next time.